Every single project, I don't care how big it is, launching a satellite, integrating a new HR system, it starts with a business need.
Yeah.
And that need, it immediately gets distilled into this one foundational question: make or buy.
Precisely. This decision is the organization looking at itself, looking at a capability gap or maybe a market opportunity, and deciding the most effective way to close that gap.
So it's a moment of what? Critical self-assessment.
Self-assessment and market analysis, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the output of that analysis is what drives every single project document that comes after. Chronological flow, starting with that fundamental make or buy strategy.
Hmm.
Then we're moving through the foundational documents, the project charter versus the contract. And finally, we'll look at how those documents really dictate the behavioral, the authoritative differences between an internal and an external project manager.
Yeah, and our goal here is to give you a single holistic framework. When you finish this deep dive, you won't just know a bunch of definitions. You'll understand the causality. You'll see really clearly how that initial strategic choice determines the legal framework,
Which then sets the rules for the leader.
which in turn sets the exact focus and, the required skill set of the person leading the work. It's the blueprint for effective project governance laid out from beginning to end.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start at that strategic level, the genesis of the project. Every project, no matter how small, begins with a business need that really it demands an answer to one single question. Should we do this work internally, or should we go out and acquire the service or product externally? This is the fundamental make or buy decision.
And that decision is the most critical strategic fork in the road. I mean, it essentially establishes the laws of physics for everything that follows. If the organization chooses to make, they use their own resources, their own people, their infrastructure to produce the deliverable.
Right.
If they choose to buy, they bring in a third-party vendor or a supplier to execute that defined work.
Okay, this is where we need to dive into the nuance, because I think this is where people get tripped up. For example, when I buy a Microsoft Office license for my team, is that a buy decision? Or when a car company buys steel?
That is the key distinction, and it's a real aha moment for everyone who deals with contracts. Buying standard resources or, raw materials, steel, software licenses, servers, even flour for a bakery, that is still fundamentally a make decision
Why? I mean, you're still buying something.
because the organization retains the core integration risk.
The integration risk. So you mean the organization is still the one responsible for taking all those inputs and turning them into the final usable product?
Exactly. You bought the flour and eggs, which are just resources, but you still have to bake the cake in-house. You're responsible if that cake is undercooked or the decoration is wrong.
Yeah.
That's a make project.
Okay.
A true buy decision, on the other hand, means you are outsourcing the entire finished deliverable or a major component of it, specifically to transfer the execution risk.
You hire the bakery to deliver the finished cake.
Precisely, you're transferring the risk that they might burn it or fail to deliver on time.
That distinction, integration risk versus execution risk, that is extremely helpful. So when organizations are making this choice, what guides them? What makes them say, no, we have to keep this in-house?
Well, they look at it through a few lenses. One is the differentiation lens. If the activity is core to their competitive advantage, the thing that really separates them from the competition, they should almost always make it.
To maintain control and expertise.
Exactly. But if the activity is context, necessary, but not something that makes you special, they often buy it. They also use a control and risk lens. Make gives you high control, but buy is attractive because you transfer that tactical risk of how the deliverable gets built.
But there's a catch, right?
There is a major caveat. Even if you transfer all that execution risk to a vendor, you always retain the ultimate business risk.
What do you mean by that?
So let's say the vendor delivers a technically perfect piece of software. It does everything the contract said it would. But that software doesn't actually solve your business problem or generate the revenue you expected.
That failure is on you.
That failure is entirely yours. You can't contract away the business outcome.
That makes perfect strategic sense. So once that decision is locked in, make or buy the governance path immediately splits.
It diverges completely. And that decision dictates the foundational document for the project.
And this is where we get the project charter versus the contract.
Precisely. And they are two completely different governing instruments. They're designed for different audiences and enforced by totally different mechanisms. The project charter is the organization's internal constitution. Its primary purpose is, well, it's all internal. It authorizes the project's existence, confirms the business case, and this is the crucial part. It formally assigns the project manager the authority to use specific organizational resources and budget.
I've heard the charter described as having political teeth, not legal teeth. What does that mean for a PM who's, trying to fight scope creep?
That's a great way to put it. The charter's legal status is basically an internal agreement. It is not binding in a court of law. Its teeth are entirely political. So if a functional manager refuses to release a key resource, the PM's only option is escalation.
Going up the chain.
Go into the governance board or the sponsor.
Yeah.
Your authority flows directly from that sponsor's political capital, which is why the charter's focus is always on the why, the high-level scope, the strategic alignment, the justification.
Which means it has to be flexible, right? To deal with all the shifts in internal politics.
It has to be. Because it's internal, the charter is generally way more flexible than a contract. You might just need sponsor approval for a change, not some complex legal process.
Okay, now let's contrast that with the contract, the external treaty, the buy scenario. What fundamentally changes about authority here?
Everything, absolutely everything changes. The contract's purpose is to legally bind two or more separate entities, the buyer and the seller.
And it gets specific.
Very specific. It binds them to terms of exchange, deliverables, acceptance criteria, payments, schedules. Its legal status is hard. It is legally binding and enforceable by commercial law.
So you're talking arbitration and litigation?
Potentially, yes, if terms are breached. And so the focus shifts completely from the why to the granular what and how much.
All the details.
All the details. The statement of work, pricing, penalties, warranties, legal remedies. And because it defines financial and legal liability between two companies, flexibility is exceptionally low.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. We've got these two documents, but the timing, the chronology, isn't always what you'd expect.
This is the critical chronological insight. For a pure internal or make project, the project charter always comes first. It's usually the only primary document authorizing the work. Simple enough.
Okay.
However, for external buy projects, the contract typically comes first. The contract is what legally obligates the parties and activates the work from that external perspective. Then, the buying organization creates an internal project charter.
Wait a minute. If the contract legally obligates them to the work, why does the buyer still need a charter? Isn't that redundant?
It's absolutely crucial for internal governance. Think of it this way. The contract governs what the vendor must deliver. The internal project charter authorizes the buying organization's PM to manage the oversight of that contract.
I see.
It allows the PM to allocate internal resources, track payments, manage scope acceptance, and, make sure the final deliverable actually aligns with the original business case. You always need a charter to authorize the management effort, even if the contract authorizes the delivery effort.
That perfectly bridges the strategic decision to the day-to-day management. And that leads us right into the human dimension. These different documents, they create different types of project managers.
Completely different archetypes. We call them the diplomat and the mercenary.
The diplomat and the mercenary.
And their skill sets are entirely different because their source of authority is different. The internal project manager, the diplomat, operates under the project charter. That's soft power. Their focus is all about internal influence, navigating the company culture, securing resources from managers who don't report to them.
So it's all persuasion and negotiation.
All persuasion and negotiation. Their success really hinges on long-term relationships and, frankly, being politically savvy.
And they face those classic internal challenges like the two-boss problem in a matrix organization. Can you paint a picture of what that's like?
Oh, it's a daily stress. The PM controls the work plan, what needs to get done, but the functional manager controls the paycheck and the career path of the actual people doing the work.
So the PM has no real authority over the team members.
None. A diplomat PM can ask a developer to work overtime, but that developer knows the PM has no direct power over their annual review or their bonus. So they're constantly negotiating for attention and priority, not issuing commands. And that internal structure makes them so vulnerable to gold plating, where unnecessary features just get added on.
Because the charter is easier to bend than a contract.
Way easier. The sponsor says, oh, can we get just one more little tweak before we launch? And because there's no legal penalty or formal change order, the scope just starts to creep and creep.
Okay, so that's the diplomat. Now, in the buy scenario, let's talk about the external project manager, the mercenary.
Right. So this PM works for the seller, and their entire world is defined by the hard, legally binding constraints of the contract. Their focus is purely commercial. Deliver the scope exactly as written, on time, and most importantly, profitably.
It's all about the bottom line.
It's about protecting their company's profit margin through really disciplined change management. Their central stressor is what we call the two masters dilemma. They have to keep the client happy to get future business, but their primary loyalty is to their own company's profitability.
So every little request from the client is a calculation.
It's a negotiation. Is this tiny feature worth jeopardizing the profitability of the whole contract?
This brings us to a super important governance fact that I think gets missed a lot. When a contract is signed, how many PMs are actually involved?
It's a vital governance fact. One contract equal two project managers. Always.
Okay, break that down.
The buyer, the client, has a PM to manage scope acceptance, payments, stakeholder alignment, all of that. The seller, the vendor, has their PM, the mercenary, to deliver the work profitably and in compliance with the contract.
And the way they interact is critical.
It defines legal liability. The coordination rule is paramount for risk management. The buyer's PM does not manage the seller's team.
They can't just go talk to the engineers directly.
Absolutely not. Any attempt by the buyer PM to directly instruct or micromanage the seller's engineers is a huge no-no.
Right.
It undermines the contract, it transfers accountability back to the buyer, and can create massive legal headaches.
So the communication has to be formal.
It has to flow formally. Buyer PM communicates with the seller PM. That's it. The seller PM manages their team.
That makes the separation of duties crystal clear. So let's bring this all together and apply it to the real world, because most projects aren't just one or the other, are they? They're hybrid.
Exactly. Few projects are ever pure. A large internal make project, governed by its main charter, will almost always need some specialized components or services that have to be outsourced.
And those are governed by a contract.
Those are governed by a contract.
So how does a PM handle that? You can't run a meeting with your internal team the same way you negotiate a contract amendment with a vendor.
They can't, and the best ones know this instinctively. They have to basically apply this whole make-or-buy analysis to every single piece of the project, and they have to be willing to switch modes, or what we call changing governance hats.
Okay, give me an example.
Sure. Let's say you have an internal IT project, a make effort, but you need a highly specialized database built by an outside firm. That subcomponent is a buy effort. So the PM is still the diplomat when they're in meetings with their own marketing or finance teams. They're focused on consensus, political capital, internal negotiation.
Right.
But the second they pick up the phone to talk to that external database vendor, they have to instantly switch into the contract manager mode. They have to enforce the statement of work, demand change orders, and prioritize compliance over, being friendly.
So that synthesis is really the most actionable takeaway here. The make or buy decision defines the governance document. That document dictates the PM role. And a modern hybrid project demands a PM who can be both, sometimes in the same day.
That's the logical sequence. And that distinction between the charter and the contract, it's the difference between governing internal policy, where the risks are performance and politics, and governing commercial law, where the risks are financial and contractual. Understanding that boundary is everything.
So next time you start a project, you can visualize this flow. You can identify where your authority is actually coming from. The charter gives you that internal mandate, the political power to move forward. But the contract provides the external obligation, the legal authority to hold someone accountable.
And that leads to our final thought for you to consider.